What happens when faith, fame, and fire collide on live television? The answer explodes before a stunned studio audience when Chris Pratt walks out after a heated clash with Joy Behar on The View. It's a moment no one saw coming, and one the internet can't stop talking about. Trust me, this one left even Whoopi speechless. The morning began like any other on The View. The chatter of the audience, the soft hum of the cameras rolling, and the familiar theme music setting the tone. Chris Pratt had arrived to promote his new movie, a film about redemption, faith, and the search for hope in dark times. But no one expected that the very topic of faith would ignite something so raw, so uncomfortable, that it would end with him walking off the stage. He walked in with that signature charm, easy smile, tailored jacket, humble energy. The audience cheered. Whoopi welcomed him warmly, while Sarah Haynes complimented his performance, noting how he'd brought something deeply personal to the role. Chris nodded, grateful. Yeah, I think it's about second chances. About understanding that faith isn't something you preach, it's something you live. And that's when Joy Behar leaned forward, a familiar sharp glint in her eye. So, Chris, she said, you've talked about your faith a lot recently. You know, Hollywood's not exactly the place for that. Don't you ever worry it turns people off? The crowd reacted with soft murmurs. Chris smiled politely. I don't think it's about turning people off, he said evenly. It's about being honest about who I am. I've made mistakes, I've grown, and my faith, it's what anchors me. Joy tilted her head. Sure, but don't you think saying things like God has a plan can come off a little privileged? I mean, what about people who don't believe in that stuff? Isn't it unfair to imply there's some divine hand guiding your success? The tension in the room tightened. Chris's expression changed. The smile faded, his voice dropped a note lower. I don't think success has anything to do with it, he said quietly. Faith isn't about winning, it's about surrender. It's about grace. Joy crossed her arms. Grace is great, Chris, but this isn't Sunday school. This is The View. People come here to hear about real life. The audience laughed nervously, unsure if it was okay. Chris looked at her, then at the audience. Well, he said slowly, to me, faith is real life. The studio fell into a hush. The energy had shifted. The easygoing movie star had become something else, intense, grounded, unflinching. Whoopi tried to steer the conversation back to the film, but Joy wasn't done. You know, I just don't get it, she said, her tone rising. Every time a celebrity talks about religion, it feels like they're trying to preach to the rest of us. Like Hollywood Jesus 2.0. Chris exhaled. That's not what I'm doing, he said. I'm not preaching. I'm just sharing what's true to me. Yeah, but truth is subjective, Chris, Joy snapped. He met her gaze. Maybe, but kindness isn't. Respect isn't. You don't have to believe what I believe to show grace. The audience applauded. Loudly. Too loudly. A tension-filled applause that told Joy she might have pushed too far. She forced a smile, but her tone turned biting. Okay, Pastor, calm down. Whoopi raised her hand. All right, let's not turn this into a sermon, folks. But it was too late. The air in the studio felt electric, fragile, like a storm was gathering, and everyone knew it was about to break. And break, it did. The show returned from commercial with an uneasy calm. The tension between Chris Pratt and Joy Behar lingered like smoke after a spark, invisible but impossible to ignore. The camera panned across the table, catching smiles that were too tight, laughter that felt forced, and an audience that sat perched on the edge of anticipation, waiting for the next flare-up. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the steady hand at the helm, tried to lighten the mood. All right, we're back with Chris Pratt, talking about his new film Crossroads of Faith. Now, this movie's already getting Oscar buzz, and it's not even out yet. Chris gave a modest smile. Yeah, we just tried to make something real. Something that reminds people that hope isn't lost, even when it feels that way. Sarah Haynes leaned forward. There's a lot of heart in this movie. I read that you took a pay cut to make it happen. Yeah, Chris nodded, chuckling softly. We didn't have a huge budget, and honestly, it didn't matter. I cared more about the message than the money. I wanted to do something that spoke to people's souls. It was a sincere moment, one that drew soft applause from the audience. But right beside him, Joy Behar rolled her eyes slightly. It was subtle, almost invisible to the casual viewer, but the audience caught it. A few murmurs rippled through the room. Whoopi noticed, shooting her co-host a quick look, but Joy didn't back down. Instead, she leaned in with that trademark grin. The one that could pass for friendly but carried a sting underneath. Chris, she said, her tone deceptively casual. You keep mentioning faith and souls. I'm just wondering, when you make these movies, do you ever think about the people who don't believe in any of that? Or is this all part of your evangelical mission? The air seemed to thicken. Sarah blinked. The audience murmured again. Chris took a breath, visibly trying to stay calm. No, Joy. It's not a mission. I'm not trying to convert anyone. I just believe stories can heal, and faith is part of my story. Joy tilted her head, pretending to consider that. Right. But don't you think it's a little exclusionary? Like, when you say things like God has a plan, aren't you kind of implying people who don't believe are just lost? Chris frowned, his usual ease gone. I never said that. You're twisting it. I'm not twisting, Joy replied. I'm asking what people are already thinking. Because, honestly, every time I hear that phrase, I think, well, if God has a plan, then where was he when bad things happened? The audience shifted. Someone coughed. Whoopi tried to intervene. Joy, you're going pretty deep here. Joy ignored her. Like, where was that plan during the pandemic? Or during all the tragedies in the world? You can't just slap faith on everything and call it purpose. Chris's jaw tightened. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on hers. You're right. You can't. But you can choose how you respond to pain. You can choose hope instead of bitterness. The crowd erupted in applause, spontaneous and loud. Joy smiled stiffly, clearly annoyed. Oh, that's beautiful, she said, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Hope instead of bitterness. Sounds like a bumper sticker. Chris smiled tightly. Maybe it should be. The world could use a few more of those. The tension flared again. Whoopi's voice cut in, firm but calm. All right, let's cool it down. This is The View, not the confession booth. Laughter rippled, but no one really relaxed. Joy wasn't finished. Look, I'm just saying, religion has caused a lot of division. Wars, discrimination, control. When celebrities start preaching about faith, it can feel tone deaf. People want connection, not conversion. Chris shook his head. That's the problem. You think anyone who talks about faith is trying to convert people. I'm not. I'm trying to connect. But connection requires honesty. And honesty sometimes makes people uncomfortable. The crowd applauded again, longer this time. Some even stood up. Joy forced another grin, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Okay, preacher man, she said, her voice sharp now. Maybe Hollywood's just not ready for your gospel tour. That did it. You could see something shift in Chris, the restraint fading, the disappointment rising. He sat back in his chair, arms crossed, his tone lower, quieter, but more piercing than ever. You know, Joy, I came here because I respect the show. I respect you. But what you're doing right now, mocking what I believe, that's not dialogue. That's disrespect. The studio gasped. Whoopi looked between them, unsure whether to step in or let it play out. Joy gave a short, incredulous laugh. Disrespect? Oh, come on. I'm teasing. You're an actor. Don't be so sensitive. Chris looked at her for a long moment, then spoke carefully. There's a difference between teasing and belittling. And you crossed that line about 10 minutes ago. The audience clapped again, a wave of support that visibly threw Joy off balance. She leaned forward. You know, you talk a lot about grace and respect, but you don't seem to handle a joke too well. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's because some jokes aren't funny when they come from a place of contempt. Joy blinked, her face hardening. So now I'm contemptuous? Chris didn't answer. He just looked at her, calm but unyielding. The silence said everything. Whoopi finally spoke up, her voice low but firm. Okay, folks, we're live, remember that. Let's not forget we've got a film to promote here. But it was too late. The tension was too thick to ignore. Joy muttered under her breath, not realizing her mic still picked it up. I swear, these Christian actors act like martyrs. Chris froze. The audience gasped audibly this time. You could see the moment hit him. His eyes flickered, his jaw clenched, his patience vanished. He reached up, unclipped his mic, and set it on the table. The metallic click echoed in the silence. Maybe this Christian actor's had enough, he said quietly. Joy blinked, shocked. Wait, what are you doing? Chris stood, straightened his jacket, and looked toward Whoopi. Thanks for having me, Whoopi. Always a pleasure. Whoopi's eyes widened. Chris, come on, don't. But he was already stepping away. The audience rose, unsure if they were witnessing a bit or something real. The camera tried to follow as he walked off stage, his silhouette disappearing behind the studio curtain. The audience erupted, some clapping, some booing, some shouting his name. The host sat frozen. Joy muttered, You've got to be kidding me. Sarah Haynes whispered, Oh my God. Whoopi exhaled and turned toward the camera, her professionalism kicking in. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, she said, her voice steady but her eyes wide. We'll be right back. The theme music rose, almost drowning out the stunned whispers from the audience. As the screen faded to commercial, Joy leaned back, visibly rattled, muttering, "He'll regret that." But backstage, Chris Pratt wasn't thinking about regret. He was thinking about truth. And the moment he finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the only way to hold on to who you are. The studio was a storm after the break, the kind of chaos that lives just beneath a smile. The audience murmured, the stage managers whispered frantically into headsets, and the co-hosts sat stiffly in their seats, pretending nothing had happened while the air still buzzed from what everyone had just witnessed. Chris Pratt had walked off live television, and Joy Behar was trying, unsuccessfully, to laugh it off. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her papers, avoiding Joy's eyes. "So," she said, forcing a smile, "that was unexpected." Sarah Haynes nodded nervously. "Yeah, Chris is a passionate guy. He stands by his beliefs." Joy scoffed lightly, her voice dripping with irony. "Oh, please. Passionate? He walked out because I asked a question. What, are we supposed to tiptoe around him because he's religious?" The audience reacted with low murmurs, uncomfortable ones. Whoopi shot her a look that said enough. "Joy, it wasn't just a question. You kind of went for him there." "I was doing my job," Joy snapped back. "We talk about controversial stuff every day. That's what The View is about." "Yeah," Whoopi replied. "But there's a line between controversial and confrontational. You pushed him." Joy threw up her hands. "Oh, give me a break. He's a movie star. He can handle a little heat." Sarah shifted in her seat, her tone cautious but firm. "It wasn't about heat, Joy. It was about respect. You mocked what he believes in." Joy turned to her, incredulous. "I made a joke. That's what I do." Whoopi leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "Then maybe this was one joke too many." The audience erupted in applause. Joy's expression hardened. She wasn't used to being the one under fire. Backstage, the atmosphere was different. Chris stood in a dim hallway surrounded by producers, assistants, and a member of his PR team. His face was tight, his jaw clenched, but his voice, calm, steady, told everyone he wasn't about to apologize. "I didn't come here to get ambushed," he said quietly. "She disrespected what matters to me, and I'm not going to sit there and smile through it." The producer, a nervous-looking man with a headset, tried to placate him. "Chris, look, live TV gets messy. Joy's just, well, she's Joy. She doesn't mean half of what she says." Chris shook his head. "Intent doesn't excuse impact." The PR rep touched his arm gently. "Do you want to go back out? Maybe smooth it over?" Chris gave a hollow laugh. "Smooth it over? No. If I go back out there, it's not going to be honest. I'm not going to fake civility just to make good television." Another assistant whispered something into the producer's earpiece, something that made his eyes widen. Chris, this is already trending online." Chris looked up. "Trending?" "Yeah," the producer said carefully. "Clips of you walking off. It's blowing up on social media. People are posting it everywhere. Hashtag Chris Pratt Walks Out is trending on X. Some are calling you a hero. Others are saying you overreacted." Chris sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Figures. The world doesn't want honesty unless it's entertaining." Back on stage, Joy was doing damage control, though it didn't sound like it. "You know," she said, trying to sound light, "if I had $1 for every celebrity who got offended on this show, I could retire tomorrow." The audience didn't laugh. Instead, someone from the crowd shouted, "You went too far." Joy blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Whoopi glanced toward the audience, trying to defuse it. "All right, folks, let's keep it cool. Everyone's entitled to their opinion." But the audience wasn't done. Another person called out. He was right to walk out. The tension was back. This time, Joy was the one feeling it. She laughed awkwardly. "Wow, I guess I'm the villain now." Sarah looked at her. "Joy, you kind of made it about him, not the movie. He came here to talk about his work." Joy sighed, rubbing her temple. "I just asked what everyone's thinking. He talks about God like he's his co-star." Whoopi frowned. "Maybe that's because faith is his co-star, Joy. Some people live by it. Doesn't mean they're preaching." The audience applauded again. Joy forced a grin, but the smile faltered when she realized she was outnumbered. Not just at the table, but with the viewers watching at home. Meanwhile, outside the studio, paparazzi and reporters were already gathering, shouting questions toward the exit where Chris's car waited. Cameras flashed as he stepped out, composed but visibly tired. "Chris, are you coming back to The View? Did Joy Behar offend you? Are you done doing daytime TV?" Chris paused at the door, turning slightly toward the swarm. "I'm not angry," he said evenly. "But I won't let disrespect slide just because it's entertainment. I wish her well, but I had to walk away." He got into the car and shut the door, leaving the reporters yelling after him. Inside the control room, producers huddled, reviewing the footage. One whispered, "This is going to break the internet." By the end of the broadcast, clips had already been cut and uploaded to social media. On TikTok, one user captioned it, "Chris Pratt stands his ground on The View. Respect." Another said, "Joy Behar finally met her match." Within an hour, millions had watched it. Twitter, or rather X, was ablaze with debate. Fans were fiercely divided. Some praising Chris for defending his beliefs, others calling him thin-skinned. One post from a fan summed up the sentiment perfectly. He didn't walk out because he was weak. He walked out because he was done being mocked for his faith. As the chaos unfolded online, Joy sat in her dressing room, scrolling through the flood of reactions. Her reflection stared back at her, proud but tired. "People need to learn how to take a joke," she muttered. But the tone of her voice told another story, one tinged with doubt. A knock came at her door. It was Whoopi. "Hey," she said gently, stepping in. "You okay?" Joy shrugged. "I'll survive. I always do." Whoopi crossed her arms. "You might want to apologize tomorrow. Just a thought." "Apologize? For what?" "Asking a question." Whoopi sighed. "For not listening to the answer." Joy looked away, her jaw tight. "He'll move on. They always do." But the truth was, Chris Pratt wasn't moving on quietly. That night, he posted a single photo on Instagram, a quiet image of a sunset with the caption, "When you're disrespected, walk away with peace. Don't fight noise with noise." Within hours, it had over 4 million likes. Thousands of comments poured in from fans, fellow actors, even pastors and musicians, all backing him up. And as the night deepened, the internet wasn't cooling down. It was catching fire. Joy Behar had lit the match, but Chris Pratt's silence was the thing making the flames spread. Because sometimes, it's not the words said on live TV that define a moment. It's the silence that follows, and the world's echo after it. By the next morning, The View wasn't just a talk show. It had become the center of a cultural firestorm. The clip of Chris Pratt walking off stage had exploded across the internet, replayed millions of times, analyzed frame by frame. The moment he removed his mic and said, "I don't have to defend what gives me peace," had been clipped, remixed, and quoted everywhere from morning radio shows to late-night comedy monologues. The internet was ablaze. On Twitter, hashtags like hashtag Chris Pratt Walks Out, hashtag Respect Faith, and hashtag Joy Behar Crossed the Line trended worldwide. Instagram Reels replayed the exchange, while YouTube channels uploaded full reaction videos, dissecting every word, every sigh, every flicker of emotion. Fans flooded Chris's posts with love and support. "You handled that with grace. You didn't shout, you didn't insult, you just stood your ground." But the backlash wasn't one-sided. Others defended Joy Behar, calling her fearless for challenging celebrity hypocrisy. A few critics labeled Chris too sensitive, claiming he couldn't take a bit of debate. And yet, even those voices couldn't deny what had just happened. That rare, unscripted TV moment when silence said more than words. Major news outlets picked it up immediately. CNN ran a headline, "Chris Pratt walks off The View, when faith meets fire." Fox News framed it differently. "Joy Behar pushes too far, Pratt exits mid-interview." Entertainment Tonight simply called it the most tense moment in The View's history. By mid-morning, The View's producers were in damage control mode. The network issued a neutral statement. The View encourages passionate, respectful conversation. Yesterday's discussion got heated, and we appreciate Chris Pratt's time and perspective. But inside the studio, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Joy Behar arrived early, head down, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. Producers were whispering, rewatching clips, gauging audience sentiment. Joy tried to play it off, muttering to Sarah Haynes, "The guy's a movie star. He'll be fine. It's not like I insulted his mother." Sarah gave her a tight smile but didn't respond. Even she could feel that this was different. When the live show started that morning, the tension was palpable. The applause was hesitant, the energy awkward. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the steady hand, opened with a knowing sigh. "So," she began, glancing at Joy, "I think we all saw what happened yesterday." It was quite a moment. The audience gave a cautious laugh. Whoopi continued, her tone careful. "Now, here's the thing. This table is about discussion. It's about tough conversations. Sometimes we push. Sometimes maybe we push too far." The camera cut to Joy, who adjusted her glasses and folded her hands. "Look," she said, "I like Chris. I think he's talented. I didn't mean to offend anyone. It was a conversation, not an attack. I think people are reading too much into it." Sarah interjected softly. "But Joy, when someone tells you that something is personal or sacred to them, maybe that's when we back off a bit." Joy frowned, her confidence flickering. "I get that. But come on, it's The View. People know what they're signing up for." Whoopi gave her a long look, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Meanwhile, on the other side of Los Angeles, Chris Pratt was sitting outside his home, his phone still buzzing from the relentless flood of notifications. His manager had called twice, his publicist 4 times. Every outlet wanted his side of the story. But Chris wasn't interested in adding more noise. He watched his kids play in the yard, their laughter cutting through the morning quiet. For a moment, he smiled. Then he opened his phone and typed a short message on Instagram. Sometimes peace means walking away. I don't regret it. He hit post, and within minutes, it went viral. Over 6 million likes in under an hour. Comments poured in from fans and fellow actors alike. Dwayne Johnson commented, "You did the right thing, brother. Always keep your peace." Zoe Saldana posted, "Proud of you for standing in your truth." Even Robert Downey Jr. shared the clip, writing simply, "Integrity looks like this." The moment had transcended entertainment. It had become a national conversation about faith, respect, and the fine line between questioning and belittling. News panels debated it endlessly. One commentator said, "It's not about religion. It's about respect." Joy forgot that the moment she made it personal. Another countered, "He's a public figure. If he talks about his beliefs, he opens the door to criticism. That's how it works." But the public had already made up its mind. Polls showed that over 70% of respondents believed Chris had handled the situation gracefully. Clips of his calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Joy's sharp tone, replayed side by side on TikTok with captions like "Grace under fire." Back on The View, the ripple effects continued. Audience members whispered before tapings. The usual laughter seemed forced, and Joy, for the first time in years, looked shaken. She wasn't used to being the villain. At one point, during a commercial break, Whoopi leaned toward her and said quietly, "You don't have to double down every time, Joy. Sometimes you just let it breathe." Joy exhaled, eyes down. "He made me look like a bully," she murmured. "Maybe," Whoopi replied, "because in that moment, you kind of were." Joy didn't answer. That night, Chris Pratt's statement dominated the news cycle. Entertainment reporters described it as measured, mature, an example of restraint. Even people who weren't fans of his movies found themselves admiring how he handled the confrontation. And yet, behind all the headlines and viral videos, the truth was simpler. Chris hadn't planned to make a statement. He hadn't stormed off in rage. He just reached a point, that quiet threshold where dignity outweighs dialogue. In the days that followed, The View's ratings actually spiked, driven by curiosity. But the tone of the show changed. The panelists were more cautious, the humor more restrained. Joy's usual edge dulled slightly, not gone but tempered. Chris, meanwhile, returned to filming a new project in Atlanta. Paparazzi caught him outside his trailer, and one reporter shouted, "Chris, would you ever go back on The View?" He smiled faintly. "No bad blood," he said. "But I think I said what I needed to say, without saying anything at all." That quote alone made the evening news. By the end of the week, op-eds described the incident as a masterclass in grace, the moment daytime TV lost its cool, and even a turning point for how Hollywood handles faith. And through it all, Chris never fired back. He didn't tweet, didn't rant, didn't accuse. He just kept moving, calm, grounded, resolute. Because sometimes power isn't in the words we say, but in the silence we leave behind. The final image that lingered wasn't Joy Behar's smirk or Whoopi's calm warning. It was Chris Pratt, standing tall under studio lights, eyes steady, removing his mic and walking off stage into the unknown. Not angry, not defeated, just free. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Chris Pratt right to walk off, or was Joy Behar just doing her job?